Okay, get ready for one of the most incredible, most unlikely stories in American history. Seriously, it's all about a constitutional amendment that took over 200 years to become law, and it happened all because a college student got a C on a paper and just refused to let the idea go.
It sounds completely made up, right? How on earth could a term paper, one that didn't even get a good grade, actually change the U.S. Constitution? Well, that's the big question we're going to answer. And believe me, the story is an amazing journey through time.
So, let's meet our hero, Gregory Watson. It's 1982, and he's a sophomore at the University of Texas. For a paper, he stumbles upon this proposed amendment from way back in 1789 that never quite made it into the Constitution. His whole argument was simple. Hey, this thing never expired. It could still become law. His professor, though, totally unimpressed. She called it a dead letter and slapped a C on the paper. Little did she know, that grade would kick off a decades-long quest.
All right, to really get what Watson found, we have to jump in a time machine and go all the way back to the beginning. See, this amendment he rediscovered wasn't some random, obscure idea. It was actually one of the original 12 amendments proposed by James Madison himself, right there with what we now know as the Bill of Rights. And it was designed to solve a problem that the founders were really worried about: how much to pay Congress.
This was the heart of the problem. On one hand, the founders knew you had to pay people for public service. If you didn't, only the rich could ever afford to hold office. But on the other hand, they were terrified of creating a system where politicians could just vote to give themselves a raise whenever they wanted, using your money. Madison saw this as a huge potential for corruption.
And, this wasn't an easy debate. James Madison's first idea was to peg salaries to something objective, like the price of wheat, just to take temptation completely off the table. But others argued that Congress needed to be flexible, to adjust pay as the country grew and changed. What they came up with was a pretty brilliant compromise.
And here it is, the solution. Congress could vote on its own pay raises, but, and this is the genius part, there was a built-in delay. Any pay raise they approved wouldn't kick in until after the next election. This basically put the power right back into the hands of the voters. If you thought a pay raise was ridiculous, you could vote the bums out before they ever saw a single penny of it.
So, sounds like a great idea, right? Well, in 1791, 10 of the 12 proposed amendments got ratified and became the legendary Bill of Rights. But this one, the one about congressional pay, it fell just a few states short. And here's the crazy part. Because nobody had put an expiration date on it, it didn't officially die. It just went to sleep for a very long time.
For almost 100 years, nothing. Crickets. Then, in 1873, it shows a tiny flicker of life when Ohio ratifies it to protest a pay hike. Then another whole century goes by. In 1978, Wyoming does the same thing, again because people were mad about congressional salaries. But for the most part, it was a forgotten ghost in the constitutional machine, until Gregory Watson started digging around in 1982.
And this is where our story comes full circle. That C grade didn't discourage Gregory Watson. It motivated him. He decided he was going to prove his thesis was right, and that this dead letter was very much alive. So he started what would become a decade-long, one-man crusade to get this thing ratified himself.
Watson's dedication here is just incredible. I mean, he wasn't some powerful lobbyist. He was just a regular citizen with an idea. He used his own money, writing letter after letter to state lawmakers all over the country. And you know what? It started to work. He tapped into this wave of public anger about Congress in the 80s, and state by state, the momentum just built and built until in 1992, the impossible happened. Just take a second and let that number sink in. 202 years, from the time of quill pens and the very first Congress to the dawn of the internet age. It is, by a huge margin, the strangest and longest journey any amendment has ever taken to become part of the U.S. Constitution. Now, it wasn't a total slam dunk. There was some real debate. Could an amendment actually be ratified after 2 centuries? Some legal scholars said no way. The time gap was just too big. But at the end of the day, the Constitution itself doesn't actually set a time limit. So the National Archivists certified it, and Congress, seeing the writing on the wall with all the public support, voted to officially accept it. It was now the 27th Amendment. So, the big question is, after 202 years, what does this thing actually do? I mean, does a relic from 1789 have any real teeth in the modern world? Oh yeah, the answer is a definite yes. The 27th Amendment has absolutely become a real-world legal guardrail. For instance, when Congress's automatic cost of living raises were challenged in court, the ruling was they were okay because the original law that created them had passed before an election. It also influenced that No Budget, No Pay Act a few years back. To avoid violating the amendment, the act couldn't just cancel paychecks. It could only delay them. It's even been brought up in cases about deducting fines from a member's salary. So yeah, this 200-year-old idea has very modern consequences.
And what about Gregory Watson, the student who started it all? Well, in 2017, 35 years after he first turned in that paper, the University of Texas went back and officially changed his grade from a C to an A. You just have to love that. It's the perfect ending to one of the most remarkable stories of civic engagement you'll ever hear.
You know, the story of the 27th Amendment is so much more than just a piece of historical trivia. It's this powerful reminder that history isn't always set in stone, and that one single, dedicated person can literally change the country. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other amazing stories are just hiding out there, in plain sight, waiting to be rediscovered?